Welcome to Performance Anxiety, the go-to resource for professionals who want to break through performance barriers and inspire meaningful action in every interaction. If you're someone who wants to excel under pressure, this podcast will give you the tools, insights, and strategies to conquer performance anxiety and to show up and shine as your truest and very best self. Today on Performance Anxiety, I'm pretty thrilled to welcome a guest who embodies transformation and authenticity, Beth Clayton. Beth is a TEDx speaker, transformational coach, and founder of Beth Clayton Coaching. Her mission? To guide high-achieving professionals and creatives in breaking through old patterns, shedding limiting beliefs, and stepping into their fullest, most authentic selves. Beth's work blends her unique background as a performer with deep emotional and mental work, helping her clients not just set goals, but achieve true breakthroughs in their lives and careers. Whether you're looking to overcome fear, navigate transitions, or simply discover the power of being truly you, this conversation is going to deliver insight, inspiration, and actionable tools. Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Good to see you.
Good to see you. For those of you, Beth and I, we both graduated from the Mason Gross School of the Arts at Rutgers University and have the same degree, an MFA in acting. And I would say kind of a lot has happened since then.
Oh my God. Wow. Yes, many decades have happened. Well, at least two. I haven't been counting, but a lot.
Yes, I think it may have been, it's 2 decades now. Has it been?
Yeah.
Yes. We are officially 2 decades.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. So,
and I still talk about it all the time as being one of the best investments of my life, which many people don't understand if it's not directly correlated with what you went out, what you went out for, which obviously both of us started as actors, but I would never be where I am right now had I not gone through a conservatory program for acting.
I couldn't agree more. Beth, could you talk about, this is such a great place to start. Can you talk about what was it about the training for you? What was it about that experience that led you to this place that was kind of the foundation for, what you just laid out there?
The way I talk about it, and my husband who also went to Mason Gross, and is that being in an acting conservatory, especially with the kind of teachers we had and the caliber of teachers we had, it was actually an introduction to how to live in an embodied way, how to live through the lens of awe and reverence and see life through a sacred lens, through the eyes of an artist, through the eyes of the soul. Honestly, I believe that's what an acting program can be about, because we're there to learn, obviously, how to perform, right? But we learn, one of the first moments of that, program is everything you thought you knew about what it means to perform and tell the truth gets completely, shifted on its head. That it's actually about something completely different, which is about deep, deep listening. And it's actually about the dismantling of the perceived self that we all go, who we think we are, and starting to actually put down some of the coping mechanisms and the strategies that we have as people to mask, to find our way through the world. And then we find something deep and true in there during that time that's bigger than all of the self-concepts that we have and the coping mechanisms that we have. And not only did we learn how to construct a character, but we learned how to deconstruct the character of us, essentially, and start to live from a truer, more authentic, more softer place, truer place. I talk about this all the time, Mike, that I actually believe the work we did is healing work. It was just wasn't for a healing path. It was all embodiment work, voice work, impulse work, movement work, the ability to be in, for instance, theater started as ritual. It started as sacred ritual. It started as a storytelling ritual where people would kind of enter in and be a part of something as a way to fully understand the human experience. So I see that time as my introduction to healing work. I just never would have known that's what it was at the time. I was using it to create more of a clear channel in my body, as we all were. But what I understand now, after 15 years in a transformational path, and as a teacher, and as an embodiment teacher, and as a coach, is like, yeah, we can use those sort of tools as a healing path for ourselves too, to have that same experience that I just described started for me, at least during that time. I went
Beth,
there
can
to
you
become an
talk?
actor, but that's something else.
Yeah, going back to something you said a little earlier when you were speaking, Beth, deep listening. As William Esper would say, what does that mean? Well, when you say deep listening, what do you?
I never had Bill, unfortunately. You're probably one of the last classes that
We
had
were the
Bill.
last class to have William Esper. For those
Yes.
listening, Bill was the legendary, the founder of the program, and Beth and I were a year apart in the program. I think I was just one
2
year,
years, I think.
two years
Two.
ahead. That's right, 2 years ahead. So I think
Mhm.
we were truly the last class to have William Esper as a teacher. And when he stopped teaching at Rutgers University and just taught at his private studio, um, so that was the Bill voice reference. But nevertheless, deep listening, that
Yeah.
was something that really stood out to me because what's funny that I don't want to go off on a tangent here. I just want to ask you, deep listening. What did you mean by that? What does that look like?
So I think my definition of this has changed over time. Um, to me now, deep listening happens in the body. It doesn't happen in the mind. So deep listening is about the ability to actually tune into the frequency of what our body is trying to share with us rather than what our brain is sharing with us. One of the things that was kind of huge in my own path was understanding that a lot of times we think that thoughts create feelings. I think many of us in transformational spaces have been taught to believe this is true, and it's actually completely false. We can have thoughts that occur to us, can generate feeling states for sure, but that 80% of the information passed to, up and down the vagus nerve happens from the body up, not from the brain down. And so what's stored in our body is deeply affecting how we think and what even occurs to us, the unprocessed emotion in our body. So now when I think of deep listening, it is me first connecting to what's true that's in my body right now. A lot of times that means emotion that's just present and I need to start to move it because emotion always needs to move. But also it's the clear channel that comes after the emotion has been moved. I find there's a deeper wisdom that starts to come through. The same way with meditation, there's this space between our thoughts and our response, right? We can start to witness our own thoughts. The same can be true in our body. We can start to witness sensations without becoming sensation. And that's through which the deeper truth starts to emerge. That's not out of the emotion, but through the emotion, if that makes sense.
It does. One of the things that I'm kind of marveling at right now is that, for the benefit of our listeners, Beth and I have not been in contact for quite some time, just for no other
Yeah.
reason that, as Beth would say, she's been lifing.
Lifing.
We've been lifing.
Yeah.
And so it's been quite a few years since Beth and I have been able to even just connect for a conversation. It's the first time in years we've been able to do that. And one of the things is I'm just kind of like wide-eyed about, Beth, is that it seems like we're sharing a lot of the same beliefs. One of the, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, I like to say the body speaks first
Mm,
before the voice, before the actual voice. The body will
mm.
have something to say about whatever's going on before it's actually manifested in on the voice. Is that something that you agree with,
Ooh,
disagree with?
I think that's great. That's so I don't know. I'd have to see how the mechanics of the body, how that works with voice. Um, but I would say that to me, the voice and the body are the same. So
Mm,
the voice and the body are, the brain is how we construct language, but the actual movement of emotion in the body, or usually motion in the body, sometimes survival energies like rage or fear, right? Or, or freeze, or these will often come through our vocal cords the same time that they're happening in the body. It's almost a simultaneous, if we know how to add voice to it. Um, that emotion moves through breath, sound, and movement. And so it's all the same. But I definitely think the body speaks before our brain speaks. We just, oftentimes will construct the story of what we are experiencing
What
in
you
our
laid
body.
out there, Beth, is that what you mean by embodiment, or part of what you mean by embodiment?
Yeah. I mean, that word is used so much now. It's hard to know, like, what does embodiment, for most people, it's sort of like manifestation. It's a word that, like, you're hearing so much now that what does it even mean? And I'm like, I don't know what the actual definition is. I could look it up right now. But to me, embodiment means learning how to stay firmly planted in the present moment in full body awareness, with recognition of what's coming through and the ability to process difficult, deep, hard emotions without bolting into our brain, without bolting into story, without like the ability to alchemize it in real time means we don't need to be in reaction in ways that cause further pain to the world. We can decode it in real time without needing to take action out of it because we have other tools too. So really, embodiment is body first. Embodiment is understanding that most of the intelligence we have as humans is through the body, not through our mind. That awakening happens through the body, not above the body, not through some of the, everything happens through the body. And that the body is, body first, as in terms of the wisdom and the intelligence that's coming through.
Hmm. I want to shift to a different theme, but before we do that, I wanted to just touch on this idea of deconstruction that you mentioned, for the benefit of those folks that didn't go through a conservatory program that we did. And I can't do anything but wholly agree with everything that Beth said. Those 3 years were a transcendent experience, and a lot of it goes beyond being able to put it into words to explain it. It was transcendent. That's probably the best word I can use. But when you talked about deconstruction, can you share a little bit about maybe what you meant by that when you mentioned it earlier?
Yeah. So I've thought a lot about things I think about at 3 a.m. and how do I connect the dots? I mean, it's like, okay, so what I got. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about, obviously, because we kicked it off with this, but I've spent a lot of time thinking about how art and performance specifically, like people who find their art through their bodies, whether that's dancers, performers, singers, people who are like, they express through their body as the primary vehicle in a way that's a little bit different than, let's say, visual art, or that's a little bit different, that there's an expression that's happening kind of ecstatically through the body in real time, right? Um, and why it's so appealing to so many people. I think, first of all, it's so appealing for a lot of like very woundy reasons, right? Like, it's appealing because any ways that we are not met or seen, as children, if we're dropped in certain ways, all the wounding, right? The attachment wounds we had, that if we didn't find, if we weren't met in those ways, then acting and performance is like the perfect heroine, for that part of our system, and becomes incredibly addictive to be seen, to be applauded, to be celebrated, to be attuned to be elevated, to be the ones that are being watched, right? And loved for their truth. You know what I mean? Like, all of these things, it's like, it's just very neuroly and addictive. But then it also is like, sometimes the medicine is in the wound, right? So really beautiful things wind up coming out of that if we can start to dismantle that, the woundy piece, from being the primary drive as to why we are doing what we are doing. I find that performers are also people who are very ecstatically driven, meaning if this was like tens of thousands of years ago, they would be storytellers in the communities. They would be the people that are maybe the spiritual center. They would be the people who are part of what's helping usher people through the different rites of their humanity, whether that's grief, whether that's birth, whether that's, coming of age, right? Like all of these different lessons that we learn as humans. Now, when we bring it to this idea of dismantling or deconstructing, I think so many of us coming into something like performance, dance, even, vocal technique, so much of what was once actually something to help people usher through different parts of their emotional experience as humans has become this very commodified, extractive, um, technique-driven medium. And not that that's bad, because obviously people having technique with something like voice and acting and all these things can be very, very beautiful. It provides an incredible structure, but it can also inhibit expression in a way. For example, if you use something like dance, I teach embodiment. If I have a ballerina come to me, I know this is going to be wicked. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is going to be
Right.
wicked in the sense of, like, even though they are the most trained dancer, they are going to be the ones that I'm going to have to, and I'm sure our teachers probably felt this way with us too, coming into, a conservatory. So the people who've been the most trained, you know what I mean? The people who think they're just the most, they're like, oh God, this one over here. It's like this one over here, to get to the authenticity, to get to the truth, is going to be a whole thing, because their whole identity is around their technique. Their whole idea of their creative expression is wrapped up in the technique and in the achievement, and then being trained by somebody else, not their own truth, not their own authenticity, not their own impulses. And even though that technique can be glorious and is an incredible art form, if we don't also balance that with the ability to learn how to listen to our own impulses and how to trust our own authenticity and our own creative expression, what winds up happening is we never really get to the authenticity piece. We never really start believing that we don't need those things to be expressed or to be in a space of our artistic expression. Now, there's a reason I'm kind of bringing all of this together, because it's about the deconstruction, and that's what you initially asked, was about how we were deconstructed. If I was to talk about, let's say, a ballerina comes to an embodiment class, my goal for the embodiment class is that this person learns to trust their own emotions, learns how to move their own emotions, learns how to trust their truth without constantly delegating it to other people, that allows themselves to become body-led instead of mind or ego or self-concept led, or who they believe themselves to be, that a lot of times is actually just a constructed coping mechanism that has been partially constructed by their nervous system over decades, based on what they've been through, based on what they've traversed and how they were met in those experiences or not met in those experiences. And so what I would be doing if somebody came to me as a ballerina, if they were highly, highly trained, of course, they're probably very gifted with being able to listen to themselves, as long as they have the through way in. And sometimes that means we have to look at that top ballerina artifice and what it is doing for them, what need it's meeting in their life, and start to find other ways to meet that need, so that they're not as limited in their identity or their ideas of themselves or their artistic expression. When we came into, acting conservatory, I believe that's kind of what they were doing with us as well. Like, I remember the first time I went in and thought I was doing a Meister class. Oh God, remember John Carp? Oh, John Carp. I was doing a scene with John Carp. And, oh, John Carp, you got a shout out if you listen to this. And I remember I was like, this is what acting is. I provoke people. Do you know what I mean? Like, the whole goal of an exercise is to provoke them, And I remember just being like I did something off the table. He was working on a little independent activity, how this went. And I kind of I don't know if I just pushed the water over with something, and he was freaked out, and with the whole moment, that spontaneous life was happening, and all of it's happening. And I remember Deborah at the time was my teacher, was like, this is all BS. Stop, 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 stop. Why would you do that? Why would you tip over his water? That makes no emotional sense, right? And I was like, oh, I thought we were just supposed to spontaneous wow. And she was like, no, everything you thought you knew Let's just like stop, like slow down, horsey. Like, slow down. We're dismantling your whole idea of how you think this is supposed to work so that you can find something true and you can find something real instead of something false, conditioned, constructed, to appear good at something, to appear, and it's like the more authentic we are, the more true we are, and I'm going to be using a lot of like really annoying transformational language terms right now, and happy to untangle this a little bit in real time. But the more we understand the more true we are to us, the more real we are to our actual authentic self. And authenticity is really about like, I don't have to try. I just am. This is just me. The more magnetic we become. And I was looking at the title of your podcast, Performance Anxiety. And I was like, ooh, what does this have to do with performance anxiety? And I'm sure there's so much that went into that title and all the different ways it can be played and how many lenses it can be looked at through. You're like, yes, but there was a lot to think about it.
So much, Beth.
How much is just the idea, what occurred to me with how anxiety producing it is to have to mask and perform for most of our lives. How much stress it causes us to have to pretend to be anyone other than who we actually are. How exhausting it is.
Have you seen, you probably have, Jim and Andy, the documentary about Jim Carrey when he played Andy Kaufman?
Yes, I did.
It came up for me today with a neighbor of mine, and you reminded me of one of his, like he said this in the course of the documentary. I literally had to take the remote out and stop and just take a breather after he said this. And you reminded me of the quote. And he said, when you create yourself to make it, meaning, when you go out into the world, you can either take a chance on being loved or hated for who you really are, or you can kill who you really are, and you can fall into your grave grasping onto a character you never were. And I was like, I heard that. I was like, cry dramatic about it. Like, oh God, am I doing this? Am I, so like, but what you're saying is like the energy that it takes, Beth, to hold up that mask, to have to keep the mask raised in front of you rather than just letting it go and letting go of the plan and letting go of the perception of how we think the thing should go. And one of the things that I realized, that you literally just taught me is, yes, I know that we need to let go of the plan. I know that in life, and like I teach communication, like let go of the outcome, release the result.
Yeah.
But I've never really been able to identify a North Star, if you will. I always say, well, set your objective aside. You can come back to your objective, listen with the intent to understand, be curious. But you use two words, and I would love to hear more about this. Body led. So being body led instead of, having, it sounds like that might be a North Star in the moments, in the embodiment, in what you're teaching. Is that accurate? Is that way off? Am I knocking on something?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because what I deeply understand now is the body is the home of our authenticity.
Why?
Because we have an entire navigation system that lives inside of our body. Gabor Mate talks about this with trauma. He talks about how the most common form of trauma is attachment trauma, and how we have two competing needs as children that are really tricky, especially given that I don't think they would need to be pit against each other if we were living in ways that potentially humans did live for most of human history up until last 3% of human history, in community with lots of adults watching out for the children with shared responsibility, instead of how we typically live with mothers completely overwhelmed as the default caregivers, living in a patriarchal society designed to burn them out completely, traumatized from from millennia. Also, men are very traumatized by patriarchal trauma, cycles of generational trauma. Gabor Mate talks about how when we are young and we're the species that needs human, we are with our parents longer than any other species on Earth, way longer. Our developmental needs are much higher. But any mammal and even other types of animals as well, they have an attachment system. We all know this, right? And we attach through emotional bonding as human beings. And there's a deep, deep need to belong to our caregivers and to our community. We imprint on them. We need them. We are dependent on them for survival. When you live in a society like ours that is that originates out of patriarchy, white supremacy, extractive capitalism, productivity, the main functions of these oppressive systems depend on disembodiment. They depend on people being disconnected from their truth, their authenticity, the earth, one another, their emotions. Because if they're connected to any of these, there's no way they're going to perpetuate a system. Their empathy would be too high. They'd be wanting to protect each other too much. They'd be too protective of the resources around them. They'd have a connection, a spiritual connection to the earth around them. There's no way they would allow what is happening to happen. The tricky part about this is when we live in this society, these needs are pit up against each other. There's also a need for authenticity, and it's also a survival need. Authenticity is this deep understanding of, we have it when we're very young. I believe myself. I trust my instincts. I trust my perspective on things. I'm connected to my gut feelings. I'm connected to my emotions. I'm connected to my truth. As young children, we have no problem with this. It's not until we get older that we start to realize to continue to attach, to continue to be in belonging, you need to start to amputate parts of yourself off of yourself. You can't be that, actually. That's not okay. You can't throw that tantrum. Not okay. Bad. The good and bad starts coming in really strong. The shaming, the dominance, the control. And when that happens, these needs are pit up against each other. And what winds up happening, Gabor Mate has a whole YouTube video on this called The Tragedy Between Authenticity and Attachment, or the tragedy of having to pick between authenticity and attachment. He talks a lot about how most addiction is connected to attachment trauma and our need to self-soothe because we are not able, we have to choose between these two things, and we will amputate our authenticity. But our authenticity plays a really important function in how we survive as humans. For most of our time, we were nomadic, right? Like we actually needed to depend on our senses, our truth, our gut wisdom, our intuition to survive. And if we don't have that, we were dead in the wild. So when you amputate someone from believing themselves, from their body, which is where their intuition lives, their authenticity lives, they become much more prone to conditioning, the conditioned mind, to being scared into believing certain things and not actually being able to sense their own truth and space. And when this happens, they suffer from mental health disorders at a much higher rate. So they're not able to maintain resilience through the difficult moments of life in the same way. You have increased mental health problems, increased emotional health problems, increased addiction, increased divorce rates, all of these things. So like there's embodiment. There's a reason it's such a big deal right now, because reconnecting with our truth and our ability to deeply care for this body, this person, understand the body needs, understand where they are in space, what's okay, what's not okay, it's absolutely crucial for us living a life that we love and functioning well in relationship, which is also the most important part of being, what they study with happiness, at least, is, and longevity, is connection to other humans and intimacy with other humans.
See, you walked us right into what the next thing I wanted to ask you about was, well, Deborah Headwall, Beth and I shared Deborah as a teacher at Rutgers. And, like the first day of class, Deborah said, we're going to learn a technique here, which is going to be the opposite that you should behave in any one of your relationships in your life.
Yeah.
And I think, what she was getting at was like this idea of being unedited, this idea of not thinking before you speak, of just staying in the moment. Now, because I speak in movies, in Philadelphia, if audience, if you haven't seen it, it's a beautiful film. Denzel Washington, Tom Hanks, Jonathan Demme directed an incredible film. There's this scene where Denzel Washington kind of goes off on his own witness and accuses him of being homosexual and all this stuff. And the judge says, sit down, everybody just calm down for a second. And the judge says, this court is blind to the matters of race, color, creed, religion, and sexual orientation. And Denzel Washington says, yeah, but we don't live in this courtroom though, do we? And the judge says, no, we don't. So this will result in the question. The question I have is this, and I know Gabor, what was he wrote In the Presence of Hungry Ghosts? What was the newer one? He wrote two, I forget what it is, but I love his books. But he was saying, what you're saying, like you have to kill authenticity to maintain connection. Otherwise you're kind of like exiled. So I guess the question I have, Beth, in this embodiment, in reconnecting people with their authenticity, in that white room in acting school in Walters Hall at Rutgers University, this is a safe space, right? But then coming out into the world where it can be a scary place, how do you help folks, or what might you recommend to be able to navigate out in the real world through embodiment?
This is so good. So first of all, we could go on a whole episode about how I'm not sure our acting classrooms were actually safe spaces for any kind of emotional healing. In fact, mostly just triggering and freaking our bodies out and increasing freeze response. And also so deeply appreciative for those experiences. But I think we both know, like 20 years ago, those were not trauma-informed rooms. Nobody had to be trauma-informed as a teacher whatsoever. And they don't even still. But it's obviously becoming, if you're on a healing path in any way, shape, or form, the ability to understand how the body works and how the body heals is really, really key. Yeah, I show you like, I get it.
I'm hearkening back to those rooms that I'm just now thoroughly. You reminded me that I'm now thoroughly impressed that we both get to sit here across from each other and be alive and be okay adults and after because it was traumatizing. I mean, like, oh my gosh, and like being a younger human also, like, I mean the rawness and a non-guardrail-y kind of room. So thank you for illustrating that, reminding me.
Right. Well, and those generations of teachers came from, the teachers who, I mean, there was like Meisner and Uda and like, all like the hardcore coming out of the group theater, like chain smoking, like hard asses of it's like totally makes sense with the way, history has worked with how we were, and holding the duality of they were incredible teachers and they were tough. And it wasn't necessarily, we weren't there to heal. That's not why we were there. Although I do believe when we have done healing, we're capable of accessing so much more of what's in there. And it's so limiting that a lot of programs don't understand that actually seeing somebody is the best way to get the best out of them, not critiquing them, embarrassing them, humiliating them, controlling them. Like, obviously, we know this. And also, I loved my time there. All things can be true. So, what the question you're asking is so important, because what I'm hearing you ask is, okay, so how does one, yes, authenticity is great. That all sounds great. But how do you get back to that if you've spent an entire life, not by no fault of your own? Because honestly, a lot of this information I've just came across in the past 5 years, and I've been on a healing path for a long time, highly interested, engaged. And so like, this is not like, how come you haven't figured this out? What I deeply get now I've been certified, in embodiment teaching and moving meditation and all of these things, and understand the body now a lot more. And what is so important to get is that the body heals. So it's not that I would ever be somebody's guru or anybody else as the healer. A healer, I'm putting this in quotation, is actually just somebody who's holding a space where the conditions are set for somebody's body to allow them to start to heal. A safe enough space, because the body knows how to heal us emotionally, just like the body knows how to heal us physically. And when this was explained to me by my teacher, Tracy Harward, she talked about the different powers of the body and the prioritization of resources of the body. And the body will always, especially when we're in young development, prioritize our survival and our safety. So like that, it doesn't matter what human body you have under the right circumstances. And I remember Deborah saying this to me first day of acting class. You are capable of anything under the right circumstances. And this is like the leveling field of humans, of like when we kind of, I'm a good person, I'm a bad person, I'm a this one. It's like, no, you're actually capable of anything any human has ever done under the right circumstances, right? Because you have a human body. And even if we have like characteristics and qualities that we are born with and like to believe we're good naturally, like under the right conditions, we would all kill. Under the right conditions, you know, we're capable of atrocity.
I was just talking
Especially
about this.
if there's
Yeah, yeah.
trauma. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
See,
like,
what
well,
were you going to say?
because we're like human beings with unchecked power will always become tyrants. We just can't help ourselves. We just cannot help ourselves as human, no matter how good you were. There's a book that I haven't read yet that I'm scary. I don't want to read, I don't think, but I think I'm going to read it. It's called Ordinary Men. True story about the police officers in Nazi Germany that were ordinary good men with children and were really good human beings. But under those right circumstances, they became horrible monsters. And it's terrifying to think about it, that like, I completely agree with you. Like under the right circumstances, we'll all become tyrants. We all could become murderers. And that's why I believe in checks and balances. And, you know, you were talking about community earlier. That's why communities are so important, why human connection is so important, because I feel like those are a natural check and balance on us human beings to make sure we're connected meaningfully, we're getting our needs met. And there's also, you know, a limit to what you can and what you can't do. And it's got to serve the greater good. So going out into the world with an embodiment and authenticity, how does one navigate this not so, it can be a tough place out there. How does one, you know, in the healing space, you're saying, you know, setting the conditions to heal. And I've become, over the last 5 years myself, a firm believer in like, I can't make anything happen. I can only set the conditions for what I wish for, and set those conditions consistently and persistently. And then the thing may or may not happen, but I can't make anything happen. So how does one, you know, after, you know, going through maybe some work with you, how do they reintegrate, you know, or become deconstructed? How does one reintegrate out into the world? And I feel like maybe you have had, you know, maybe your own struggles or your own journey with like kind of a reintegration from, you know, the conservatory work.
Well, the conservatory work would be something, because that was just like, that was a whole beast of like, yeah, we could go on a whole episode about that like shift from learning into the business and how jarring that is on every single level to the artistry and tenderness of like what was created in there, and how completely separate it felt from what we were doing in those spaces. So what I'll do is I'll speak to, so in the work I do, I'm a coach, and I've been a coach for a long time. So that means I really work with people's, and the words were so tricky, right? I call myself a coach. I call myself a mentor. I call myself a sacred guide, because I'm also trained in deep, you know, in holding sacred women's circles and the transformation that can happen in that energetically and spiritually. And then I'm also an embodiment teacher. And so I dance between these different roles and mentorship. And my main goal is I work predominantly with women. Well, I work with women and non-binary folks. And that hasn't always been the case. And it's someday I do think I'll work with men again. But I'm still building the capacity right now, because I do want to work with men through the lens of patriarchy, because I also believe that men have been deeply, deeply damaged by women, and by women who have internalized patriarchy themselves that then gets passed along. So the whole point here is I work predominantly with women and non-binary folks. And when we're talking about the body specifically, the way that I've been taught to work by my teacher, Tracy Harward, who created the Ishtara body method, which is just one of the best. I mean, and she does work with there are teachers who work with men with Ishtara body as well. But
How do you
I
say
work
that?
with
What is it? Ashara? Is that
Ishtara? So it's Ishtara
Ishtara?
body.
Got it.
And it's a moving meditation technique, which is highly, highly effective. It's been one of the most effective transformational paths that I've ever been on. And it took somebody telling me to do it at least 5 times before I would actually look into it. And I was like, okay. And now I'm certified in the work and I teach the work. And so what we do and what's so important is when you're working with the body, and we're talking about authenticity and body led, it doesn't start with just like, listen to your authenticity. Because nobody would even really understand, what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. So really, we're just recognizing that so much of that intuition and authenticity machinery, who we innately are without having to censor ourselves or how we're showing up in the world or mask, essentially, lives in the body. We just are, right? It's just who we are, before we know how to start to control things and shift and change it. So it's not about returning to the authenticity at first. It's really just about, how do I start to tune into my body as a being and not a thing? That's one of the first things we focus on. And we do it with small groups of women because it's very important that people are witnessing one another move. And it is a moving meditation technique. So the body speaks, the body shares their stories. They're easy to read once you understand how to speak body, which people pick up pretty quickly. But the reason it's so important that we're witnessed is it's the medicine for, we can go through a lot. Trauma forms not because of what happened to us, but because we were in it alone a lot of times, because we were not attuned to, because it was an experience of isolation while we were experiencing something very difficult. So trauma heals in community. It's not meant to heal even one-on-one, really. It can start obviously with a therapist. Of course, we need to take it gentle, we need to take it slow. We need an unconditionally loving nervous system that kind of emulates a mama or a loving father or whatever it is that will see you through the eyes of love. But eventually we need community. We're meant to heal trauma and nervous systems in community with other nervous systems. This is really imperative so that we're with other people, that we're being witnessed, and that what's really important for safe spaces is that there's very clear agreements with how people relate to one another. So we can't just be like, hey, you're triggering me. I don't like what you said about this. I don't agree with you politically. This is your thing. There's a really strong, which don't get me started on all of that, but there's a really strong, in this space, I take responsibility for everything coming up in my own body. I take responsibility for if I'm triggered by what that person said, what their body did. It's all about, I'm struggling. I'm noticing I'm pretty activated right now. I'm having a lot of anger run through my body. Can I have some support? We take so much responsibility for our own emotional life. And I don't think many of us really learned how to do that. I think whenever I felt difficult things, my first thing was because somebody else just did something to me. That's why. And it took a long time for me to go, oh, wow, everything in here, I'm an adult now. So everything in here is my responsibility to decode, understand, work with, find release for in ways that are not perpetuating harm and that are meeting the needs of this body. So we start to heal in smaller spaces like this that are very trauma informed. I find this is the best way. We practice there because the body will build new resilience. So new neural pathways will start to come through. We'll have new experiences. We also learn how to feel really difficult emotion with pleasure, breath, expression, sound. So we wind up feeling a lot safer because we know how to work with it. And at first, some of those places we can't go to alone because our body just won't let us. It won't let us. Our body moves on their own timeline. And this is what I mean, the body prioritizes safety first, and then it'll very on their own timeline start to show us what needs healing. And the body knows what we're ready for and what we're not ready for. But we have not built the capacity yet to start to allow into our system without massively going into some sort of, psychotic break or mental breakdown or any. So it doses, the body doses, they dose what we can experience in such a wise, beautiful way when they're not pushed. And when you allow them to just lead, hey, I turned that off. Okay. When you allow them to just lead. Then we practice with safe relationships in our life. So outside of those spaces, we look at the people who were like, who do I know has goodwill towards me? Who do I know I can trust? Who do I know always sees me through the lens of compassion and curiosity. Then I can start sharing these parts of myself that maybe I wouldn't have shared otherwise, that I allowed to come through, that maybe I'm really fucking pissed about something that I've never owned that I'm really fucking pissed about. Maybe something happened to me that I've never said out loud. And now I'm going to go tell someone who's a dear friend of mine outside that space and share that truth with them. And then it kind of ripples out, and as we dose it, and then we go, oh, I had some big emotions come up around that. That was hard. Now I'm having a total freeze response. Oh, I know how to work with that. I'm going to bring it to the group, or I'm going to bring it to my moving meditation practice. I can do this. I can feel this. And this is how we slowly build safety in feeling the emotions that come up around our own authenticity as we claim it again, and sort of the stored emotion that lives in our body from all the times we weren't allowed. We had to mask. So an example of that would be like, let's say we're really triggered in a situation with a parent, and we're saying, this isn't fair. And we're feeling that huge, like, this isn't fair. This isn't fair. Or we're witnessing something that feels scary to us, and we want to go, no, don't do that to that person, or don't say that to that person. We have that very natural, like, don't, no. Or I need to run, or I need to hide, or get away from me, or fuck no, or excuse my language. Like, get out. But we can't do that, because if we do that, we could be potentially damaging our attachment, or inviting violence, or inviting domination, or inviting physical harm of some kind. And so instead we freeze. But that rage didn't go anywhere. That rage is stored in the psoas muscle. That rage has stored in our legs. That rage has lived in us our whole life.
She'll remain nameless, but I have a very dear close friend. She got a TMJ, developed TMJ, grinding her teeth every day. And she went to a healer, massage healer. She went through the healing that, release, emotional release, all this stuff. And after it was all said and done with, the healer said to her, she said, look, we both know there's nothing physically wrong with your jaw. What is it that you're not saying in your life? And she realized, and she transformed. And in that moment, she went out, she fired a bunch of people in her business and transformed her life. And she could not be happier. And it was something that she, like you laid out there, Beth, that she was holding on to something, didn't want to speak up at the time, found its way back into a space in her body. Once she released that, she became clear. And then was able to take action. And your idea, this idea of like a nucleus, this picture that you painted, this nucleus where the inner circle really is this safe space, this trauma-informed space, this space where you can stumble and fall and learn how to walk again, per se, right? And then the outer ring of those closer people to you that maintain, that hold space for you through compassion, through curiosity. And then eventually, like, having that kind of spin out into the world. I love this image of starting in the middle and kind of branching out. And, one of the, it's as somebody that, hasn't had a drink in 9 years, the only reason I was able to get over that first hump was those rooms, those, Alcoholics Anonymous, being in that space. And your point about having to be witnessed, I think nowadays, and like, I'm so passionate about this because I think it's something that's so easily forgotten. Did you know Kimball Studio in New York City, or Kelly Kimball?
No, it sounds familiar.
Kelly's not with us anymore, but Kelly was just an oracle. You would have loved her. And one of the things that she would say about, working together in a space, she would say, look, you do not get to inject yourself with courage alone in your bedroom. You have to be amongst other human beings to be able to go to the next level. And you're painting this picture, Beth, of, how isolating trauma can be. And really the only way out is through that connection. And I'm going to ask you about your TED Talk. We're almost running out of time, and I've got my questionnaire for you. I don't want to let you off without asking those questions at the end. But, someone once said the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but connection.
Yeah.
And hearing, you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
cool. So, TED Talks are, of course, a big deal. And I know it's been a little bit of time, right, since you've done
Mm-hmm.
your TED Talk. And one of the things I did want to talk to you about is like, there's a lot of women that listen to this podcast, and a lot of them are speakers or want to be speakers. As someone that's gone through the TED experience, can you share a little about what that was like? And then also
Oh,
now in
sure.
hindsight, because it's been some time, right?
Yeah.
Looking back on it, how are you feeling different about it now than maybe you did when you went through it?
Oh my God. So good. So first of all, I'll say I think my TEDx experience is a little bit different than others because I just was so lucky to have gotten that opportunity through the recommendation of someone that was already deeply respected. That's Mark Fisher and Michael Keeler of Mark Fisher Fitness, and had already been in that orbit and are just so highly respected in their fields that all they really had to do was say, talk to this girl. And and I don't think that that's typical. I know it can. I didn't even know what I was going to talk about when they said, you're just doing one. So like, what do you want to do it on? Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh, and Broadway was the topic. So I had to figure out how to interweave what I do now with Broadway because it was TEDx Broadway.
If I may, can I maybe just interrupt for a second, Beth?
Yeah.
Can I temper? Okay, so for the benefit of the audience, Beth was almost not taking credit there, and I might add to that, knowing Beth for a little while now. I would say maybe that's true, but also Beth is someone that has always done the work. Always,
Thank you.
always done the work. Someone who teaches the work, someone who shares the work, but never a human being who doesn't drink the potion herself first before she shares it with other
Oh, yeah.
people. And I know, or I like to believe that I know, that recommendation came through the fact that they recognized in you someone that was doing the work. And being in maybe their position, they probably thought to themselves, you know what? More people need to be connected with this. This human being needs a platform. So I would say it sounded like, you won the lottery, but really at the end of the day, I believe it was because the work was being done, the work was being recognized, and someone in a position to facilitate that translated the work out into the world. That's just my 2 cents. I might be right, I might be wrong, but I just wanted, for the benefit of the audience, to make sure that they knew that you just didn't win the lottery. There was a lot behind that probably translated to that act happening.
Thank you for saying that. And thank you for making sure I acknowledge myself for that in your rights. And I do always drink the potion first. I jump first. I do the work first. And I think one of the gifts that I have is that, I don't know gifts, but I am somebody I have a lot of integrity. And I think the women and the people in my communities know I've siphoned out what works and what does not work. And so if I'm inviting them on something, it's because it freaking works and because I've done the work myself and because I felt the transformation in my own experience, and I wouldn't share anything that was not super effective and helpful. So thank you for that.
Of course.
So I did my TEDx on self-sabotage, which is wild because it's still what I teach. It's just through a completely different understanding and lens. And number one, I will say about that experience is it was so fun and it was so awesome. And I learned so much I was doing a TEDx on self-sabotage, but like all the self-sabotage came up during the process of actually writing the talk, practicing the talk. I did all the same things I did as an actor, which I can see now, which is just like the absolute procrastination, the not being all in, the like, oh my God, so much. And luckily my partner would not let me fail. And I will credit this to Josh too, is he was like, you are going in the room now and I'm timing it and you are not coming out until you write that talk. And because he knew it was creating so much anxiety that I still didn't have somebody to make me do it, So what I understood about self-sabotage at that time, and what I'll describe here is, first of all, the day was so amazing because it was like there were so many cool people there. There was the person who started the Trevor Project, and I can't remember his name right now, but oh my God, there were just so many amazing people that I was just so honored to be there with. And it felt like such a huge moment. And that's the thing I will say is, in my mind, for people who are like, oh, just score that thing. I'm going to score that thing. And that thing is going to be the answer. And we all have that fantasy, right? I think when I got it, I was like, oh, this is what I've finally been waiting for, to have the breakthrough, as if like Oprah had called me that day and suddenly I was going to be on Oprah. And I really thought, oh, this is the beginning. I think I got one client from that. One client from that audience, from it. It's like, maybe it'll go viral. Who knows? Like all the fantasizing, right? And what I'll take is like, you never know what's going to be the thing. Just treat everything the same in terms of how you pour all of you into it from authenticity. Because what it did do is, even though it didn't translate into a client at that time, I created programs out of that one talk. And then I created retreats out of that talk. And not even just because people were interested, but because the framework became clear through the doing of it. And through the being forced to sit in that room while my partner's outside going, you're not coming out until you finish it. That is such a huge part of it. I will also say, if we're kind of looking at it through looking back, what would I kind of, first of all, I have so much compassion for the Beth who did that talk, because it was badass and she was badass and like she went for it and she used everything she knew at that time and all the stuff she had at that time. And I also look back and cringe a little bit because I understand so much more now. And so it feels so amateur, like how I was talking about the subject of self-sabotage, because I had a very surface level understanding, which still felt very powerful for people. And yet I understand just so much more. That was like the tip of the iceberg. And I really do think it has to do with body, because in my mind, I was like, oh, you have to, the whole TED talk is about meeting, your protection. What's underneath your protection is your wounded child, right? So this is not like a new topic. And every self-protective strategy that we have that's largely unconscious is a result of unconsciously avoiding certain experiences that still live in our body that we don't feel safe to feel. We feel disassociated from, we don't even know exist. Now I'm like, oh, we can't actually shift our patterns until we work with the nervous system and the body. So anything, I was like, yeah, you can do a lot of inner child work. You can like really connect with your wounded child and your adapted child and the coping strategies and talk to yourself. And that can be really beautiful. And that can be a start to a healing path. But if you're looking for sustainable change, it happens in the rewiring of the nervous system, because the nervous system is so much more powerful than we understand.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I just learned that not too long. I just accepted that. It landed on me not too long ago. And it's led me to go get a master's degree in psychology, because I've been doing all this work and I realized, and there's a quote that you're probably familiar with, I don't know. It's a young quote, and he says, until you make the unconscious conscious,
Yep.
it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And having, been around the block now a few times myself, I'm like, why do I keep winding up in some of the same spots? I'm conscious. I do the work. I've been seeing my therapist longer than I've been with my partner, and I've been with her almost 16 years. What am I not doing that's causing me? I did the meditation. I'm not drinking. I'm doing, it's like, I'm letting go. I'm reading the books. I'm going, and it's like you're saying, until you rewire that nervous system. And it's like, that's what drove me to this, more education and more training to go, I really have to be able to get deep on people. This idea that I'm going to teach them just some breathing techniques and all of a sudden that's going to be, they're going to wind up in the same place eventually, unless we really get in there and start to rewire things and go deep. And I just had to highlight that, because it's funny how it was interesting that you were mentioning that now, because it is a belief that I've finally come around to going, oh, like, that's why, like, we live in circles until we do that thing.
Yeah. Can I tell you why? Can I just share with
please.
why?
Absolutely. I love why.
So talking about like the priorities of the body. And again, this is not mine. This is something I've learned from other teachers who have shared this with me. This is in my certification. I learned this. This is not my IP. This is not any, is that the body will at first, of course, so our nervous system always picks up where our caregivers dropped us in our times of development. So when you think of the body as so wise and intelligent that they're this like steward watching you when you're super young to make sure that you stay alive and that they minimize whatever harm they can on your development. So any of those strategies that were implemented by the nervous system early were actually minimizing harm. They were doing a great job. What becomes problematic is where they are not, when we're ready to heal, we're safe enough to start to do the healing work, but yet we don't. We're not safe enough to do healing work until we're out of the traumatic circumstances. You don't heal in traumatic circumstances. You heal when you're in safety. You can minimize harm in traumatic circumstances by having connection and attunement. But like the healing doesn't really start to occur. If you think about like surgery, like you're not healing from surgery the day you have surgery. That's where the trauma in the body is happening of the actual, and like the body needs a moment, you know what I mean? And then it'll start gradually healing. But first it has to process what just happened. Like, whoa, you know? So when we think about the powers of the body, so when you think of powers of like where the energy is flowing, most of the energy that we have in our body will flow towards self-protection when we are in circumstances where we feel unsafe. Okay. But when we're early in development and things are unsafe, but then we'll start moving into healing mode when we're out of coping mode. And when we're out of coping mode, healing, the first step in healing is that our body will start to share with us where the patterns are. Now, the way the body shares them with us is through creating the same thing over and over again until we see it clearly. We're like, how did I wind up here? Again, there's a nervous system pattern that keeps playing like a melody over and over again in the body until you're like, is this the same freaking song again? This is the same play. This is the same different characters, same play, same emotional experience. What the hell? And then it's like, because I call this, it's underlining, bolding, and highlighting what needs to be brought into a healing space and worked with in the body themselves. When we can't see it, we can't change it. If we can't feel it, we can't heal it. We know this, but oftentimes we won't feel it until it becomes really painful. So the way we start to heal is by recognizing these painful patterns that keep playing over and over again in our lives. So when we're in a healing space, most of the energy is flowing towards healing. Okay. And then once I'm not saying it's like this, like steps where it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. You can be healing and creating at the same time. It's just sort of like looking at how much of the energy is going into different areas. Once we get to a point where we are healed enough to start to shift the patterns in our lives, we'll go towards creating the new. This is where the energy will go, is to so we've rewired enough in our body that our body recognizes a new potential ending to that story. And then we can create that new ending because we've already felt it in our body, but we can't create something we don't have a felt sense of. Sort of the same way we talk about how you can't vision something that hasn't, from the way memory works, you actually can't vision something you haven't experienced or seen done. That's why it's so important that there's representation, because people who are not represented visually in our society as having accomplished certain things, that is a disadvantage to their entire system of being able to be in an equal playing field with the ability to create those things. If you grow up in poverty and you've never had the felt sense of safety, you are at a disadvantage of being able to manifest and create. And that's why equity is also so important. So yeah.
You reminded me of, no one believed, people probably listening to this know this, but when Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, a bunch of guys did very soon after that. After it was, oh, this is possible. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's like, did they magically become faster? No, they were the same person they were the day before it happened. Now they just, like, as you're laying out there, like, had a projection, an ideal to strive towards, a belief like that it was possible.
Yeah.
Wow. I see we have a couple minutes left, and I have a questionnaire that I ask at the end of every episode. And you probably know this questionnaire because it was asked at the end of the Actors Studio to all.
Cool. It's been a while though, so
yeah. So James Lipton's no longer with us. The show is not going on anymore. It was one of my favorite shows, and one of my favorite parts of the show was listening to all the answers to these questions from different actors. And I get to be here with you now, Beth, and ask you these questions.
Oh God. Okay. What are these?
So with that, the first question
I'll be body-led. I'm going to be body-led.
What is your favorite word?
Scrumdiddlyumptious.
What is your least favorite word?
Freak.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Goddesses.
What turns you off?
Men thinking they know everything.
What's your favorite curse word?
Fuck. Of course.
Yeah.
It's
What
my son's
sound or
favorite
noise?
one too.
What's that?
It's my
Your
son's
son's favorite?
favorite one too.
Who do you learn it from?
Oh, probably me. Probably me.
What sound or noise do you love?
Birds singing.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Screeching, like nylon, nails on nylon. That noise drives me absolutely insane. If like somebody's scratching like a nylon pillowcase, it's not nylon,
Mm-hmm. It's like a
plasticky
zipper,
nylon.
almost.
Yeah. Oh, I can't even imagine it. I don't like it.
Ugh. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Performer. I mean, that's so silly because I used to be one, but I do feel like there's space for me to do that again, but in a way where I don't need it. It just gets to be from full artistic, unleashed. Let's see what's even possible here. Yeah.
God, let me know when that show goes up. What profession would you not like to do?
Accountant.
Mm.
My dad's an accountant. Yeah.
If heaven exists and you believe in such a thing, what would you like to hear God say when you reach the pearly gates?
Just welcome home.
Ladies and gentlemen, Beth Clayton. Beth, where can we connect with you more meaningfully? Or even more meaningfully, I should say.
Yes. So at BethClaytonCoaching.com or Beth Clayton on IG. Yeah, can I just do like a tiny share of a freebie that they could get?
Please. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Because I'm really excited about this one. And this one's really for women or women who were, or people, humans who were assigned female at birth and who lived the early years in that assignment. I have this incredible quiz that I've been working on and that's now out called the Good Girl Protector Quiz. And I've been working on it for the better part of 6 years, but the last 9 months, I went deep into all the nervous system patterns, the thoughts, the behaviors with time, energy, money, purpose, creativity, that I've seen over the past probably 10 years of my work, but especially now that I've been so deep in understanding patriarchal systems to help women understand where their nervous system and their coping strategies and patriarchy meet and how it's slowing them down with creating what matters to them most in their lives. And so I just would love to plug that because my whole goal with it is like, even as women take it, they're just like, how did she know what I was thinking? And how did she know my exact experience? And I'm like, because I've been working with a lot of people for a long time and there are patterns here. And yeah, so I'm really excited to bring that into the world and to share it.
Where can they find that? Is that on your website? Like where
they
can they
find
get
it on my website. They can also find it on my IG and on Facebook and all those things too.
I will for our listeners and viewers, there will be links for all of that stuff below. So you can go take the quiz and find out what happens.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mike.
Beth, it's my pleasure. Thank you for joining me. Thank you as always. We could have gone 16 hours.
I know. We really could have. There's so much more.
We have to go life.
Yes, go life. Yeah. Thank you so much.
A pleasure.